Hello, I am Barendipitous, and we are 1 day away from the release of Brawlhalla Tales Nyx, the first Brawlhalla graphic novel. Oh boy, I'm really excited for this to get in everybody's hands. This is going to be really cool. I've already talked about the people behind the graphic novel, and months ago I made a video about my expectations and hopes and theories about it. But today I figured it'd be neat to it might be helpful to go over kind of the lore that we know already about that. Basically, what should you know before going into this? The lore that we already know about the main characters of this story. I will say that technically, I do believe that this story will be written in such a way that you won't need to know Brawlhalla lore to appreciate this story. And I think that's totally fine. Again, Brawlhalla lore has always been written in such a way that however much you read, whether however much or however little you read, you will understand. You'll get something out of it. You'll understand the general tone. You'll understand enough, essentially. But for those of you who want to know a little bit more, I thought I'd go over the lore of the of the people that we know are going to be main characters in this story. So, of course, on the cover of the graphic novel, we see Nyx, of course, and we see Brin, and we see Cross. We also, in the 10-page preview provided by IGN a little bit ago, we see that Teros also features fairly prominently, at least in the first few pages, because Nyx goes. It seems that Nyx is going to Brawlhalla to try to hunt down Teros, who has been claimed by Brin, and Nyx is trying to, basically, fight for Teros' soul in order for her to fight for her own soul, to not be dragged into the realm of Asmodeus or something like that. So I'm going to go over the lore of each of them to kind of sort of get you ready for tomorrow. My pre-order copy should be arriving tomorrow. I'm very, very excited. I pre-ordered back in when it was first announced in November of 2024. So anyway, let's start with Nyx. Probably going to be the main character of the whole story, considering the title, Brawlhalla Tales Nyx. So what do we know about Nyx so far? I'm just going to sort of read through the lore and point out a few things here. So, Nyx, the Freelance Reaper. The ravenous slur's time was up, but we weren't staffed for getting that kind of horror to slip the mortal coil. When we needed a specialist, we called Nyx, Belzar, Ikaruski god of death and volcanoes. And then, I've done work for Hermes, Orcus, Namtar, lots of smaller Pantheon jobs. I did overflow work for Osiris, just helping out, really. I have Valkyrie when I can. I like it because it's 100% commission. I wouldn't say Brin and I are friends, but I respect her work. Psychopumping ain't easy. Now, based on the IGN preview, it seems that Nyx doesn't know who Brin is. But at the start of the story, she just saw this she just recognized that Brin was a Valkyrie, and that, kind of saying that Teros is not even a Viking and all that kind of stuff, right? So I'm guessing that in Brawlhalla Tales Nyx, then Nyx and Brin are going to be meeting for pretty much for the first time and being friends, enemies, frenemies. We'll see. Anyway, here we go. Many cling to unfinished business on the mortal plane, and all need a guide to their next destination. Nyx combines unmatched skill at collecting the very powerful and very unwilling with a uniquely independent worldview. She snatched the unmovable titan of Heracleon down to Hades, and on the return trip, dropped the ancient Sphinx of Alexandria off at Anubis' front door. She dragged the 100-legged Banshee of Donegal, kicking and screaming, to the realm of Aron. The undead Lord of Illyria was her first repeat customer and a nice source of steady work. Disaster struck when she took a job collecting an entire pantheon whose time had come. When the dust settled, 11 of the targets were missing. Nyx is not the type to miss a mark, and professional pride put her on a 1,000-year hunt that has led her, finally, to Valhalla. Odin's warrior heaven is home to all sorts of metaphysical rule breakers and rogue souls. Nyx sees an opportunity to turn a nice profit, closing a few cosmological cold cases, like the half-bear Viking, Bodvar, that smug mobster, Cross, and maybe even the Golden Knight, Orion. In the meantime, she fights in the grand tournament, knowing her Quetzalcoatl quarry, Queen Nai, must be here somewhere. So for the longest time, ever since Nyx was released, lore nerds were sort of speculating, kind of assumed that Nyx came to Valhalla initially because she was hunting for Queen Nai. However, that does not seem to be the case here, at least according to the preview. It seems she was drawn to Valhalla because she was hunting for Teros, because she was not a freelance reaper. She was under the thumb of Asmodeus. She was under a contract and under pressure from Asmodeus to collect like monstrous souls for Asmodeus's realm. So that is actually a little bit different from what we're seeing here. But again, Matt Woomer, one of the writers of the graphic novel, has said on Twitter that the Brawlhalla Tales Nyx is canon, and that it kind of gives a little more insight into Nyx's lore. So what might be happening is that we might be getting a little more context into how Nyx became a freelance reaper. And apparently, it sounds like at the very least we're going to get Nyx is going to have a decent amount of respect for Brin and her and Valkyrie work and everything. So yeah, I guess kind of what we're seeing here is what Nyx is up to after the events of Brawlhalla Tales Nyx. So we're probably going to get more of an origin story with the graphic novel, at least origin of like Nyx in Valhalla. Which is really cool. Also, another neat thing is that in the IGN preview, Nyx mentions that she is a mortal who is working as a reaper. For years, lore nerds like myself were wondering, what is Nyx? She's a reaper, but that, what's her background? Was she like from Earth? Was she from somewhere else or whatever? The preview doesn't tell us, but clearly she is mortal and is working, kind of in the Reaper setting to save herself, essentially. So kind of almost like, bound by like contracted servitude to Asmodeus, but maybe something will happen that will allow her to be more freelance. So that's the sort of context we have about Nyx. Let's move on to Brin. Chooser of the Slain, Slayer of the Chosen. Now, I think this title is really cool because Chooser of the Slain is a common phrase used for Valkyries, because Valkyries, choose, slain warriors who are slain in battle to come to Valhalla. But Slayer of the Chosen kind of points to the fact that she is fighting in the tournament and is fighting, the warriors that she and other Valkyries have chosen. So I think that's kind of fun. Anyway. Child, you are my daughter and a Valkyrie, a goddess. Your father was a mortal, it is true, but he was a great warrior, perhaps the greatest. So do not complain to me that the elves whisper behind your back. Ignore them. They know you outshine them all. Or put them to the sword. The Valkyrie Hypernia to a young Brin. Hypernia is Brin's mother. And then the other quote is, most Valkyries are too by the runes to see greatness where I find it. Do you remember their faces when I brought the Minotaur to Valhalla? Brin drinking with Heimdall. So, Teros in the lore, we knew, years ago that Teros was brought to Valhalla by Brin. The idea is that most Valkyries just kind of grab, run-of-the-mill, really good run-of-the-mill, like Viking warriors. Or even like warriors from other places, but generally just sort of like normal human warriors, or like maybe around the Scandinavian area. But Brin tends to look outside of that. She brought in Teros, she brought in Petra, she brought in Asuri, a lot of the more unusual mortal legends were brought in by Brin because she can see their potential. You'll see that in this lore here. Children are rare among the immortals of Asgard, and every immortal with any heart came to love Hypernia's daughter, the heir to her immortal mother's impossible beauty and her human father's legendary charm. That is Sir Roland, by the way. Sir Roland's lore mentions that he fell in love with a Valkyrie and all that. So, anyway, Brin is the daughter of Hypernia and Sir Roland. Brin grew up in every corner of Asgard. She made it her school and her playground. Raised to be a Valkyrie, she nonetheless can shoe an 8-legged horse, weave the threads of fate with the Norns, and curse a blue streak in Dwarvish. As a Valkyrie, her sense for the mortal mind has helped her spot greatness in the most unlikely places, not just in princes on battlefields holding their swords high. So yeah, again, like her she's able to kind of see greatness where many other Valkyries don't because, again, she is half human, half Valkyrie. 3 of her most shocking choices have won the Great Tournament, but Asgard is a vast society, and some don't see Brin as a true Asgardian, while her success has bred jealousy as well as admiration. Brin was drawn to the tournament by a desire to study these mortals. Does she belong with them? She watched, learned their ways, and eventually came to love their bravura and their mettle. Now she competes for the pure joy of it, her human thirst for the fight, surprising everyone, including herself. So that's the context behind Brin. And I've mentioned this in other videos too, but considering that Nyx is likely coming to Valhalla for the very first time in this graphic novel story, and the fact that Brin is seen as a prominent figure on the cover, what I'm guessing is that essentially Brin is going to kind of be the one to introduce Nyx to Valhalla, to kind of, in the graphic novel trailer at BCX 2024, we saw Nyx and Brin being 2's partners and 2v2 partners. So, you see it a lot in stories where you have a newcomer to a place, and you have someone who is native to that place helping the newcomer along, and that's a really good narrative device for us, the reader, because Brin is not just introducing Nyx to Valhalla. Brin is kind of introducing us to Valhalla and the culture of Valhalla, and also where Brin fits into all of this. So I think Brin will continue to be seen as more of a misfit, or like maybe trying to navigate the socio-political landscape of Valhalla, of Asgard, without getting too deep into sociology or politics or anything like that. But like she's dealing with like social pressures and social norms and things like that, right? But yeah, look out for that. Next, I'm going to talk about Teros a bit to kind of give you a little more context, because we did see Teros in the IGN preview. So Teros, the Minotaur. Searching the dragon's chamber, we found yet another passage leading down. By the dwarf's reckoning, we were now 20 levels below the ruined deep. After a long descent, we emerged into the center of a vast stone labyrinth. Lincoln Furfoot, only survivor of Heroes for Hire's expedition to Peril Mountain. I think it's supposed to be Peril Mountain. I hate adventurers. Always so sure. Like they have a magic spell that can tell good from evil, right from wrong. The orphan boy calf Teros relied on his terrible visage and instinct for sudden violence to survive on the streets of Dragonport. He got by as a stone carrier and debt collector until, in the gladiator pit, he found his true calling in reckless combat. He thrived in the ring, crushing cleverer foes with implacable fury and animal wile. In the end, he could only be pitted against the rare ogre or giant, and he moved on to a life of wandering. For a time, he carved out a place in Fangwild Forest, shouldering aside a wyvern and a hobgoblin clan. Later, he fell in with the Iron Legion, turning the tide of the Battle of Orc Pass for the Zombie Lord. His tenure as Wizard's henchman ended typically, with the evil mage shrieking to him, "Finish them!" while fleeing through a magic portal. He lived for a while deep in Peril Mountain, where he found a strange comfort in the maze of abandoned tunnels. In Valhalla, Teros is indifferent to the rules or intent of the tournament, but takes savage joy in all battle. His nightly visit to the mead hall is heralded by throngs of fleeing Valhallans. So yeah, this is very interesting, because in the IGN preview, we're basically seeing Teros' last mortal moments dying in a battlefield, basically. And with kind of like that metadev outfit and everything. The way that this paragraph is written kind of suggests that maybe like he was in that that labyrinth later on, but it did seem that he fell in his tenure as a wizard's henchman ended typically with the evil mage shrieking while fleeing through a magic portal. Considering what we're seeing in the IGN preview, I think this might be where Nyx finds Teros. Maybe Teros had that special armor because he was like a wizard's henchman in a battle, and he was basically the last one standing, and the wizard had fled and everything. By the way, Battle of Orc Pass for the Zombie Lord, this is mentioned in Jala's lore. Jala and or Zul's lore. The zombie lord in here, I believe, is Azoth, and then involves Jala and Zul and whatever. And then that's why you have the Iron Legion skin for Teros. But that Iron Legion skin is different from what we see in the IGN preview. So this whole wizard's henchman thing is probably what we're seeing here. It also just occurred to me that the that preview, the IGN preview, as Asmodeus asked Nyx to collect Teros' soul for his realm, for the realm of Asmodeus, the afterlife, the underworld of Asmodeus, and Teros is just sort of like kneeling there, like dying, like on his last legs. I imagine, I kind of thinking, this is kind of a little bit of theorizing, I suppose. If Teros had not like woken up in a blind rage and had not like fought Nyx, I have to wonder if Brin would have collected Teros at all, because Teros basically died in battle against Nyx, right? Although I guess you could also say that Teros, if Nyx had not come, Teros died in a battlefield, died because of battle and all that kind of stuff. But hey, maybe Nyx is the reason why Brin was able to collect Teros. So anyway, fun little thought there. But yeah, that's kind of what we know about Teros here, and I'm guessing that the story is going to focus more on Nyx, and Nyx and Brin, and again and Cross. As well, thanks because of what we see on the cover. But yeah, Teros is important because he's kind of the soul that Nyx is fighting for in the first place, right? Finally, I'm going to talk about Cross. Now, it's not very clear what part Cross has to play in the graphic novel, but here again, I think the lore can give us some insight into maybe to help us sort of predict what Cross might be doing in the graphic novel. I think it's the case where anytime you see something that's like lore related for Brawlhalla, and you're kind of like wondering like what's going to happen or whatever, I think you can make very good predictions by just reading the character's lore, and you might be able to tell make a very very good educated guess on what might be happening. So here's Cross, the deal maker. In the 1951 case of New York v. Joseph Cross, charges against the gangster were dropped when eyewitnesses claimed the murder weapon was the man's own shadow. Trials and tribulations, strangest court cases of the 20th century. Sure, pal. Flip the coin. Heads, you win. Cross to a demon who is getting a bad feeling about this deal. In Italy, with the Allied Army, PFC Joseph Cross, I believe that's Private First Class Joseph Cross, found an ancient double-headed coin. That night, he dreamt of a demon and struck a deal. The demon would fight for him, and after his last fight, the demon would get payment. After the war, the New York underworld was rocked as terrifying new force moved in. Cross's outfit took over and ran numbers, protection, and extortion in all 5 boroughs. At night, enemies would get a personal visit from Cross and what those who survived called living shadows. For years, Cross owned the town. As he grew obsessed with wealth and power, Cross turned deeper to the occult. He waded through the blood of New York's wizard population to accumulate magical artifacts and monstrous henchmen. But after Cross obtained the shrouded gauntlets of Belzar, things began to turn for the worse. Strangers appeared in town looking for him, hard-looking figures with archaic cloaks and ancient weapons. Battling these cloaked vigilantes with his fists and guns was far harder than scaring New York hoodlums, but Cross, with his demonic henchmen, held his own. Valhalla is the ultimate loophole in his deal with the demons, and the frightening but charismatic mobster holds his place in the grand tournament for the love of battle and fear of the alternative. But now Cross and the demon have a new wager, and like-minded legends are placing bets of their own. So essentially, Cross was welcomed into Valhalla thanks to a Valkyrie somewhere. But the deal with the demon is that after Cross's last battle, the demon would claim Cross's soul for the demon underworld, maybe Asmodeus' realm, maybe somewhere else. So that's why. So Cross is incentivized to keep fighting in Valhalla, because if he doesn't, if he really has fought his last battle, he's going somewhere worse. So, which is just a really cool dynamic there. So that demon that you see in his signatures with the punches and the grabbing and everything like that, that's the demon there. And also that double-headed coin, that is the Geminius Virens. It is mentioned in the lore of Mordex, Thatch, and Caspian. So, but Cross is the one who has it right now. So pretty cool. Lots of cool stuff going on in here. What does that mean for the graphic novel, though? A little hard to say because I, the way he's smiling, he kind of looks a little bit like a villain. Like if you see like classic like Star Wars posters or other like cinematic posters that feature a bunch of like different faces and whatever, you see like the hero either standing up front or like their face or whatever, but you also see the villain featured prominently as well. So I wonder if Cross is maybe like trying to use Nyx's predicament to his advantage, perhaps. There's some cryptic language back here. Cross and the demon have a new wager, and like-minded legends are placing bets of their own. So it kind of sounds like maybe there's some schemes going on here. This is also especially interesting when you consider something from, I believe, Mordex's lore, actually. At the end here, it says, Mordex finds himself in accord with the likes of Thatch and Azoth, much to the fury of his nemesis. Which is Diana. So yeah, Valhalla forms strange alliances. So I think that like a lot of there's several legends in Valhalla in Brawlhalla that are clearly like villain characters, right? You got Mordex, you got Thatch, you got Vrax, Azoth, Cross, Dusk, right? And actually, I think Dusk's lore also mentions something like this. Yeah, here we go. So yeah, Ember and Ragnar loathe Dusk as a betrayer, but Dusk's intensity and ambition have gathered him a following among the less scrupulous legends. So there's, I think, like among like various like villain characters, I think there's a fair amount of scheming going on among those who would be classified as sort of like villain or like selfish villain characters, and Cross is definitely one of those, right? Oh gosh, where did Cross go? There he is. Cross is definitely one of those, like, one of those characters that might have his own motivations and stuff. So I'm very interested to see what he will try to do and like what his end goal is. The fact that Brawlhalla Tales Nyx is not really seen as a it's being marketed as not part of a series, but more of it's basically, it looks like it's going to be a standalone story essentially. So whatever Cross's scheme is, it'll probably be made clear in the 112 pages of the graphic novel, so it's probably not going to be terribly elaborate, but I look forward to seeing it and seeing how we will all react to Cross's part in this story. So because Cross did not really feature in the trailer for the graphic novel, did he? So anyway. There's that. Oh, I'm sorry. There is one final thing I want to talk about, actually. So, and this is in the graphic novel trailer, we do see Thor in there. So Thor and Core are commentators in a match, right? I just want to kind of give a little bit of context to this as well. You may know this already, but here we go. So we have a couple of Valhallan announcers, not Thor and Core, but other people. It's like, was Thor supposed to be in this free-for-all? No, Bob. He just climbed out of the sands and joined in. And there's also a note here, like, Thor coined the term Brawlhalla. So Brawlhalla is an in-universe term. And Thor created bleacher jumping, which is the Asgardian tradition of reckless spectators joining free-for-alls mid-match. So Thor is definitely the kind of guy that would jump right into the match, right in the middle of the action, essentially. So it's not too surprising that Thor would be a commentator, because he's just like he's definitely a Foda or a Toast or any of the other commentators you see that just love Brawlhalla. Thor is definitely one of those people as well. Also, the fact that Thor and Core are together, it's not just because their names rhyme. Thor and Core will reenact their epic battles in the Elven Wars. If you read, I think in the lore of Core and Dusk especially, you will see how there's references to this war that these elves with their golems tried to march on Asgard and take it over, but Thor and others defeated the golems and the elves and all that kind of stuff, right? Core, of course, was one of the golems that fought against Asgard, but then when Asgard won, the golems were sort of assimilated and kind of were put to work in Asgard. But Thor and Core like to, they fought against each other in the Elven Wars, and I guess they're cool now, and they like to reenact those battles. So anyway, I think that'll be fun to kind of see a little bit of back and forth there, or like a little bit of commentary from Thor. So those are all the things that I think you should know from Brawlhalla lore about before reading the graphic novel. So yeah, if you pre-ordered it, it should, at least in America, it should come tomorrow. Very exciting. I have looked for a bunch of videos throughout the rest of the week talking about it. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. And until next time, all the best.